Number 1. The Parade. I hope you'll read this story as it happened a really long time ago. I mean, a really long time ago. I'm in my 70s now, and I was just around 15 years old when it happened. But I'll never forget it. I grew up in a small town that was visited by a circus once a year. It would be a 3-day event. On Friday, the circus would have a parade that went through the middle of town. The circus would then have a performance that night. The following 2 days, there would be a sort of carnival on the circus grounds during the day, followed by the shows at night. I was personally fond of the trapeze artists myself. My family lived in town and our road was on the parade route. So when it was time for the parade to come through, we would all come out and sit in the front yard and watch it pass. It was a bright and sunny day this year, and the Grand Marshal heralded one of the best parades I had ever seen. During the parade, one thing, even at my young age, caught me off guard. Most of the circus acts marched together in the parade. The trapeze artists were together, the animals were all together, and the clowns were all together, and all the other groups in the same way. However, towards the end of the parade, there was one straggler, one clown who just seemed completely out of place. He was entertaining though, and I didn't have a fear of clowns like some people do. No one seemed to notice or care that he was nowhere near the other clowns. He would go up to the spectators on the side of the street and spray some with the flour on his costume. To others, he would make all sort of weird clown gestures with his hands. I'm really not sure what to call them other than clown gestures. When the clown got up to my yard, though, he stopped. And he stopped and looked at me for what was a long and uncomfortable moment. He then smiled, and it was creepy for some reason to see him smiling within his painted-on smile. And he walked up to me and pretend patted me on the head before taking his hand off. He then took his finger quickly, ran it down the side of my face, and then he was gone. It was weird, but I didn't think about it too much. He was a clown, and clowns act weird. Later that evening, my family and I went to the show. I watched the clown portion of the show, and was in a way relieved to see the clown was in the show. For a few moments, I had the idea that maybe he wasn't actually part of that circus and had been someone who interjected himself into the parade. I'm not sure what I thought, but I had been a little worried up until that point. The show was great, and my family left and went home. When we were home, and I was in bed, something woke me up in the middle of the night when I was sleeping, and I really wasn't sure what it was. After I'd been awake for a few moments, I heard something. Sort of like a rock hitting my window. You know the sound. I crawled out of bed and got up, and looked out the window. There was no one or nothing there. I thought it was my imagination, until I heard it again. I went back and looked out the window, fully expecting to see someone outside, but there was no one there. At this point, though, I was fully awake and pretty thirsty, so I decided that I was going to go downstairs and get myself a glass of water. I walked down and went into the kitchen and got me a drink. After taking my first gulp, I turned and walked back into the living room, and I dropped my glass and screamed when I saw the clown looking in through the living room window, waving at me. When I screamed, he blew me a kiss, and he ran off. My screaming, of course, woke my parents up, who came downstairs, and I explained to them what I saw. They really didn't do anything about it, though. I mean, sure, the clown was on our property, but they couldn't prove it, and even if we could, all he did was wave and blow a kiss at me. This was a much different time than nowadays, too, and clowns really didn't have the stigma they have nowadays. Regardless, it was a pretty creepy experience, turning around and seeing that clown waving at me through my living room window. I remained inside the house until the circus left town a few days later. Number 2. Part-time Carnie. Have you ever heard of Camden Park? It's a really small amusement park in Huntington, West Virginia. I grew up in that area, and at the time, Camden Park seemed like a really big deal to me. Since then, I moved to Los Angeles, and when I moved there, I started going to Magic Mountain, and ever since, Camden Park just seems like a really small playground in comparison. Anyway, my very first part-time job was at Camden Park. I was simply working in a food booth, but it was a pretty big thrill for me, really. I got to hang out in the park for free when I wasn't working. Now, you might think that I wouldn't want to do that since I was working there all day, but honestly, I really enjoyed it. One evening, this happened sometimes, if the park had low attendance, they would allow the ride operator of the Big Dipper roller coaster to just continue to have the train cycle through the ride over and over without changing passengers. I was in the park this evening, and I was the beneficiary of several cycles. The ride operator, Chet, was a much older and stereotypical Carnie type. He was one of those guys who always had some tobacco in his lip, even if he was drinking soda. And he always smelled like he had been drinking, but not soda. He was a nice enough guy, but he always made me feel uneasy, and he was one of those people who would trap you in a conversation, and you felt too nice to walk away from him. This happened to me quite often, and my friends all made jokes that Chet had the hots for me, and I really didn't like those jokes very much. On this night, though, when he finally stopped the train, he made it a point to come over and help me out of the train. When he did, his hand, quote, unquote, slipped and rubbed up against the front of my blouse. He apologized for it, but the smile on his face told me that it wasn't an accident, and the apology was not sincere. Work became a bit uncomfortable for the first time ever after that. Chet would be working nearly every day, and he would start coming over to the booth several times a day to talk to me. I'd stopped going to ride on the Big Dipper when he was there because I didn't want to see him. He would ask me why I hadn't come to visit him, and I had to tell him I'd just been really busy. Although I told him this, it didn't stop him from coming to see me over and over every single day. On the days when he would get off around the same time I did, Chet would start waiting outside the park to walk me to my car. It got even weirder, though, when he was waiting for me a few times on the very few days where he did not work. One night when I was closing and going out to my car, Chet met me outside of the park and started coming after me to my car. He was talking kindly to me, and he actually asked me out on a date. I explained to him that I was only 16 years old and he was much older, to which Chet replied, "I won't tell anyone if you don't." I declined and got into my car and left. That was all I needed to hear in order to know that this was a bit worse than just a harmless crush. He fully insinuated he wanted to have sex with me as an underage girl, and that was just wrong and creepy. I only had a few more weeks before school started, so I talked to my parents and we agreed that I should go ahead and just quit the job. For a while afterwards, I didn't hear anything from Chet, but he actually came to my school's homecoming game that year and tried sitting close to me. I was with my friends though, and we were able to avoid him. He did follow us out to the parking lot, and that was not the last time I saw him either. He began hanging out just off school grounds, and I saw him many times after school. Late in the fall, I actually got a phone call from Chet. I was worried not knowing how the guy had gotten my number. He began asking me why I quit working at the park and asked me if I wanted to get together with him. I once again told him that I was too young for him. He again told me, "I won't tell anyone if you don't." I then told Chet to leave me alone, and I would never date him, and I didn't want to talk to him ever again. It didn't stop though. Chet would keep showing up. I assumed he was also watching me when I wasn't aware, because the final time I ever saw him, he found me when I was alone. It was a day after school, and I was walking to my car at night, and Chet came around the side of another car just as I was getting into my car. He came up to the car just as I slammed the door. Chet kept asking me to open the door, and I refused, telling him to leave me alone. He was holding my mirror with his hand, and when he did, his shirt lifted up, and I saw that he had a knife in a sheath under his shirt. Chet saw the fear in my eyes when I saw the knife. He just smiled at me and said, "That's just Beth Ann. She won't hurt you if you go on a date with me." I just freaked out at that point and hit the gas while he was holding my mirror. I think I may have ran over his foot with my back tire, but I didn't care. I drove home, told my parents what had happened, and we called the police. I told them everything that happened and that I felt like he had been threatening me. The police apparently had a talk with him, and it must have worked or something, because I never saw Chet again. However, not seeing him didn't make my life any more comfortable. He had a tendency to show up when I least expected it, so I made sure to always be expecting it. I also never went to Camden Park again, and I have no idea if he continued working there or left. When I turned 18, I went to college in Los Angeles, and I much prefer going to Magic Mountain. Number 3. The Dark Game. I grew up in a rural community, although I won't mention exactly where it was. We didn't really have much in the way of entertainment, so it was a big deal when the county fair took place each year. It was fun enough when I was a kid, but it was much more fun when I was a teenager, and I got to go there on my own. I wasn't particularly popular in school, and I was a bit of a loner, but that was okay. I liked that. I was one of those guys who dressed all in black, had black hair, and didn't go out very much. We didn't have designations such as goth or anything back then, and it wouldn't have applied to me anyway. I was just sort of my own guy. But it was fun for me to just have some money in my pocket and be able to spend the evening enjoying the lights and noises and people of the carnival. I had just finished filling myself with all sorts of terrible treats. Corn dogs, cotton candy, tons of soda, and I was eating an elephant ear as I walked past the rides. And by this point, it was completely dark out, and the full lights of the fair were on. It was something else to see, and it was such a different atmosphere than I was used to. I used to think that must be what it was like to walk through a city, but I've since learned it is very different. This was also happening back in the 1980s, and they were playing a lot of 80s hairband music very loud throughout the fair. I didn't want to ride on any of the rides so soon after I'd had stuffed myself so I decided to just wander around to the carnival games and see if there was something I wanted to play. There were, of course, lots of people who were there with their families and girlfriends and such, and it almost seemed like I was the only one at the entire fair by myself. Like I said earlier, that is how I liked it. But it got the attention of someone at one of the booths, and I would have preferred that it didn't. "Hey, what's the matter, kid? Can't find a girl to take pity on you?" I heard a voice say, and I knew he was talking to me. I turned and looked, and it was a guy who was running a dart booth. You know, one of those games where they have balloons and you have to hit them with the darts to win a prize. And he was just a hideous-looking person. He had dry and wrinkled and scaly skin, maybe only a few teeth in his grin, and they were blackened and gross, obviously blackened by the tobacco he was chewing, and I can't even do justice to how ugly this guy was, and yet he was insulting me. I mean, I knew he was just doing it to try and raise my ire and then maybe bluff me into playing the dart game. It was insulting, though, that someone who looked like him would be talking down about my appearance. So I shot back at him. "Looks like you know a lot about girls taking pity on someone." The guy sort of smiled a bit, but I could tell he wasn't too happy about my comment. "Why don't you try your luck here?" he asked. Most of the prizes were these small square mirrors that had pictures on them. Some were pictures of hard rock bands, some were cartoon characters, but they also had some mirrors that had pictures of scantily clad girls and scantily clad men on them. The guy at the booth picked up a mirror that had a guy wearing nothing but a thong, with an enormous package on it. The guy said, "I bet you're just dying to have this mirror." The man was irritating enough on his own, but I've always hated it when people make comments about guys being gay as if it was a bad thing. And no, I'm not gay, but I've never had an issue with gay guys. So, he got my goat there. I went ahead and went up and gave the guy $1, and he gave me 3 darts. It's been so long now that I don't remember exactly how the game went, but I won on the first 3 darts. Then, just to piss that Carnie jerk off, I had him give me the mirror with the guy on it. His eyes grew wide, and he paused, but he gave me the mirror. Then, like an idiot, just to piss him off more, I took the mirror and licked the picture of the guy on it. Just, to really get to that asshole. He called me a faggot and said some other things, but I just walked off. I kept the mirror, though, thinking it would be a good gag gift for my sister. I, of course, stayed really late at the fair. It was closing down when I finally decided to go home. It was weird how dark the area got when the lights began going out. On the way out of the park, I had to go past the games again. The area was really dark because the games had closed down earlier than the rides. But even though the games were closed, The Carnie from that dart game was still there, leaning against his booth, looking at me and smoking a cigarette. I gulped, but immediately looked away. I didn't think he followed me at first. When I left the fairground and was headed out to my car, it was a bit of a hike. The parking lot was a pretty big field. I had arrived late in the day, so I was parked pretty far away. There really weren't many people out there walking around, but there were some. I tried to hurry to my car without making it actually seem like I was hurrying. I kept feeling like I was being watched or followed, although I really didn't have any reason to feel that way. I doubted the Carnie could have been stupid enough to actually try to do something to me. If you've ever had that feeling, though, you'll know that sooner or later, you have to give in to it and look behind you. When I did, I sure as hell saw that nasty Carnie following me. Ah, fuck, I thought to myself. This was all I needed. I'd seen way too many scary movies where a person is being followed and they just pretend like they haven't noticed and walk slowly. I didn't care. I just took off running towards my car. I didn't look behind me again, but when I got to my car and turned to face the door so I could put my keys into it, I saw the guy had been running after me, and I didn't have enough time to get my keys out of my pocket and into the keyhole before the guy tackled me. I fell hard onto my ass, and the guy punched me right in the nose. I coughed and sprayed some blood out before the asshole smiled his nasty, toothless grin at me and reached behind him and pulled a big-ass hunting knife out of the back of his belt. He took the knife, put it to my face, and then traced it down to the crotch of my jeans and held it there, the point against my zipper. I tried like hell to push him off me, but I just couldn't get him off. He had way too much leverage. Only girls should like dicks, so I guess I'm just gonna have to cut yours off, he said, or something similar to that as he held the knife to my crotch. I sputtered blood out and told him I really wasn't gay. I was just trying to piss him off, but he didn't seem to care. The knife ripped through my jeans and my boxers and even caught a little bit of flesh. As I screamed in pain, though, finally something happened and someone tackled the fucker right off of me. I didn't know who it was at the time, big jock guy wearing a leather jacket, but he took that carnival freak down easily. It was fortunate for me that, although there were not a lot of people left at the park, it was also not completely empty. Several people saw the freak chasing me, and fortunately for me, one was this big fellow who I later learned was named Thad. The Carnie got arrested, and I went to the hospital with a minor wound, down there. Fortunately, it healed pretty well. Left a funny looking scar that I have found has been a wonderful way to try and pick women up afterwards. I usually tell them, hey, want to see something funny? Which honestly isn't the best lead-in before I show them that part of my anatomy. Oh well. Anyway, fortunately for me, I have no PTSD for fairs or anything. There's no ending to the story like that. I went back to the fair the next year. I am, however, more careful about who I try to antagonize. Hey everyone, Killer Orange Cat here. Shocking, I know. You're probably expecting Blue Spooky to show up at the end of my video, right? Just kidding. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to hit the button next to that soft orange lump in order to be informed of new content. Feel free to share this video if you want, and follow me on Facebook. If you have any stories you'd like me to narrate, please feel free to submit them through Facebook or by emailing me at foxbarking44@gmail.com. Now, I've given it a lot of thought, and due to my own interest in it, I've decided that I am going to go ahead and narrate some creepypasta videos that are stories other than my own. Now, while the true stories are the focus of my channel, and they will remain the focus of my channel, I think doing creepypasta readings can help my channel in several ways. They may be able to bring more attention to the channel, as well as giving me more practice with voice work in between the true story videos. But please keep in mind that any creepypasta readings will be done only in addition to my true story videos, never in place of them. Doing creepypasta readings will in no way decrease the amount of true story videos I do. And remember, make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.